Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Untold Story. I'm Martha McCallum. It's great to have you with us this week. And I have a terrific guest to talk about a number of things that are in the news this week and also something really exciting that is ongoing for 2025, which we're going to be covering throughout the course of the year. Jonathan Morris joins me. Hi, Jonathan.
Thank you, Martha.
It's great to have you with us. Obviously, Jonathan is news analyst and a New York Times bestselling author and a Fox News contributor. He's a former priest and a theologian, and he advises us on a lot of ethics issues for Fox News and history and all sorts of great cultural insights that he has. So it's always good to see you.
Thank you very much, Martha.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that are in the news this week and last week. You know, starting with this bishop who gave a blessing to President Trump, I guess you can call it that, and J.D. Vance and his family the other day. It caused quite a stir. I did quite a bit of coverage on it last week. I was wondering what your thoughts were about the fact that she was sort of calling out the president in that environment.
Listen, I spent many years preaching from the pulpit. As you know, I have a lot of strong views on a lot of issues, and most of those strong opinions I kept to myself and not at the pulpit. Why? Because what are people there for? Why are people going to church? Why do we have a long history, tradition of presidents, even presidents who don't necessarily go to church every Sunday, making the effort and the symbolic act of going to worship God in a temple, in a church? That's because they're going to be inspired by God, and they're going to be inspired by things that are much bigger than what's going on in the daily news. This pastor, this bishop from the Episcopal Church, decided to use her opinions about very political issues, yes, that have ethical elements to them, but to say, I am going to give a little preaching to the President of the United States about these issues that are very complex and cannot be fully explained in a 10-minute sermon. And that's why it was so, I think, off-putting. She gave one side, of course. You can only give one side on those complex issues in a very short period of time.
And she was dealing with LGBTQ issues and immigration issues. I think not too many people missed it, but for those of you who might have, she really was very pointed at President Trump and saying that, people were scared in this country.
Scared for their lives.
Scared for their lives.
LGBTQ.
And she wasn't talking about people in Chicago who we're hearing from who are very relieved that some of the criminal migrants are being removed from their cities. For me, as a Catholic, I was so jarred because in our churches, we do not delve into people's opinions. I mean, sometimes there are, loose, lightly veiled things that sort of might reveal to you how the priest feels about a subject. But in general, I think that it is never about him. It's never about making a personal statement. It's about interpreting the gospel, the readings, the Word of God, and helping people to understand the Word of God. And so I just found it very jarring that a pastor in that capacity would step outside of that role and become so personal, and obviously wanted to promote herself because she then went on, I think, 8 different TV shows and programs in order to continue to promote her opinion.
Yeah, I have no problem. In fact, I think there's an obligation by any pastor to speak about principles of truth that affect political life and that affect social life. But those principles have to be explained as principles, that this is the gospel principle if you're a Christian, right? And that's what she's a Christian. You take the principles and you apply it to political life and to social life, but you keep it as a principle. You don't say, therefore, what you're doing is wrong. That gets into policy, and that gets into execution of a policy. And that's the role of a government. That's not the role of the church. The church should be preaching principles. What is the dignity of the human person? Whether you're an immigrant, whether you've been here forever, whether your parents were born here or not, makes no difference about the dignity of the human person.
Including the dignity of Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, absolutely. And therefore, that's why when you just say, I'm going to therefore take my specific issue that I care mostly about, right, and just rail on that without going back to the principle and without recognizing to the audience that there are various ways to approach the execution of a policy that's related to the principle.
So the bishops, Catholic bishops, also wrote a letter about the very aggressive actions that have been taken in week one by the Trump administration to remove people who have broken the law and are in the country illegally. And they would say that that was the first law that they broke. And now many of them are being removed at a pretty good clip. Tell us a little bit about the letter that was written and your interpretation of it.
Yeah, I kind of beat up on this Episcopal bishop. Now it's time for me to say what I think about my own church leadership as it relates to this topic. For many, many years, the Catholic bishops of the United States of America and other countries have told only part of the story as it relates to the social teaching of the Catholic Church as it relates to, in this case, immigration. Right? The social teaching of the Church. What is that? It is the whole, it's the totality of the Church's teaching on social issues or political issues, right, that have come down through the popes and through other teachings of the Church. For example, the ecumenical councils, Vatican II, for example. What does the Church teach about immigration policy and as it relates to the principles of truth of the gospel? Number one, there is a natural right to emigrate from one's country. In other words, everybody has a right to leave your own country. If you decide, Martha, you want to go to England or to Germany tomorrow, the United States shouldn't stop you from leaving our country. But we don't have a right necessarily to immigrate into another country. That is the responsibility of the country that we want to immigrate into, and to decide what are the safe and also sustainable levels of immigration. Right, so then we have the right to emigrate, but not everybody has a right to land in a particular country. And the Catholic bishops have said over and over again, only part of that story, welcome the immigrant. Yes, but it's not only the right, but the obligation of our government leaders to put immigration levels at a safe and sustainable level.
Yes, I agree with you, and you articulate it very well. I think of, going to Minneapolis during the George Floyd riots and hearing from residents that they were so unsafe, that people were, that people in their community had joined gangs. Some of them were immigrant-driven gangs or part of gangs that exist in other countries, and that they felt so unsafe and that people were getting killed. Young people who are join these gangs or getting into fights with them in the streets, and they were terrified of what had been brought to their community as a result of some of this immigration. And we look at the murders, as I mentioned, Laken Riley and other people who were killed by people who were not here legally. We do have legal ports of entry. We have a process for asylum. And it is, I think, unfortunate that the bishops do not speak in terms of safety and justice for everyone on both sides.
Yeah, they might put a little line on it, but and let's say put out a press release of a page or two that basically rails against the policy of the Trump administration in this case, and then a little line that yes, government officials have the obligation to make immigration safe, et cetera. But that's not the story that's going to make the news. And J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, and the border czar Tom Homan have had to answer to journalists who said, wait, I thought you were Catholic. Why are you going against your own church? And J.D. Vance, I think more convincingly than Tom Homan, from a philosophical point of view, said, hold on, I'm Catholic. And because I'm Catholic, I want our immigration policy to be safe, right, for our residents, as well as, he didn't get into this much, but I think he should. He needs to talk about the safety of those who would like to immigrate. Mm-hmm. The process right now to get over the border, and not just under Trump, but under President Biden, and for many, many years, if you're in Ecuador and you want to come to the United States of America, you risk your life, you risk your safety. You risk so many things being taken advantage of financially and physically. I say Ecuador, wherever, it's a long way away. Also coming from Mexico, right? And that is not respectful of the dignity of the human person. I would hope the Catholic bishops now stand up and say, oh, actually, this is an opportunity to work together with President Trump for safe and sustainable levels of immigration.
The Untold Story continues right after this.
The other story that's absolutely integral to what you just brought up is the tragedy of human trafficking in this country. And, I would encourage people to open their eyes on this issue. There's a lot of ways you can do it, but there's a movie called City of Dreams, which I watched recently, which is a, produced movie, but it's based on a number of stories that informed the narrative of the tale that they tell, which is a young boy whose family basically doesn't have enough to feed all of the kids in the family. And he gets taken by a man who's supposedly going to bring him and a bunch of other people to soccer camp in California. And become a big soccer star because he has talent on these dirt fields, and he's playing with not a real ball, and and it follows the story of this young boy, and he basically instantly, as soon as he crosses the border, is sold into human slavery as a garment worker at the age of like 9 or 10. In a house that is surrounded by a fence, but basically is in a decent neighborhood, and can't get out, can't escape, is subject to human slavery. And in this house, there are also young girls who are being videotaped and sold online, essentially. And I think that, we don't spend enough time and attention on this part of this story. And as you say, where do the U.S. bishops stand on human trafficking that happens to people crossing the border, and how much has the church done to bring it to light and to force a response by the U.S. government to this that is even stronger than it has been?
Yeah, that's another part of the story. And it's another part of the story of why a message from the U.S. government that says it's illegal to cross our border without proper documentation. But if you get across that border, you will be able to get a job, and you will be able to live in the shadows of the second-class population. That's the way under the Biden administration and many others before that. That's the message. You can't come in, but you can actually come in. Just do it this way. And when you get here, we're going to have such crazy laws and policies of enforcement that you're going to be able to live here for many, many years, in many cases underpaid and living in danger. That's not fair. And to suggest that now that President Trump is closing the border or securing the border, that's the bad thing, that's not being Catholic, that's not being Christian, that is such a partial and false narrative. And I think we have to stand up and say, let's support all of those elements of the Trump administration as it relates to immigration that we can, from a natural law and from a Christian philosophy perspective, Judeo-Christian philosophy, and then let's help President Trump and his administration make his policy even better. And I hope we can do that as a nation.
Yeah, allowing the cartels to traffic people across the border and then sell them into, workhouses and prostitution, or, a lot of these young women think they're coming here to do domestic jobs, and it's not that at all. So allowing that is anything but compassionate, and it's a story that I think we just need to continue to bring more and more attention to, because it's absolutely heartbreaking, should not be happening in this country at all. I want to ask you also about something that we're going to be talking about a fair amount this year, which is the Jubilee Year, a Holy Year 2025. What is a Holy Year? The Pope has proclaimed this one in this every 25 years. So tell us what does it mean?
Yeah, sometimes I beat up on Pope Francis a bit, also when he talks about immigration. In this holy year that he has proclaimed, which happens usually every 25 years, I think he got it totally right. He's named this year the Year of Hope. I studied Latin for a long time, and I never get to use it, but I'll use it right now. The actual name of the holy year is spes, which means hope, non confundit, which means that hope never confounds or disappoints, right? Which comes from Scripture. Hope does not disappoint. And it's the Holy Year comes from the Judeo-Christian tradition. In the Jewish tradition, it was every 50 years that a Holy Year was announced, and it was a year of the forgiveness of debts. It was a year of personal forgiveness, and it was a year also of special prayer and rejoicing in which they looked back and thanked God. The Jewish people looked back and thanked God for all of the blessings. And because of that gratitude, they would then offer this forgiveness, whether it's from the leadership to the people or people among themselves. And the Christian tradition has taken from that, and since the year 1300, the Catholic Church has, in different ways, called for a Holy Year. And this was 2025, so beginning actually on December 24th, all the way up until January 6th of 2026 will be this year of hope. And it's an invitation by the Pope for people to come to Rome, to the Vatican, or to other places around the world and the country if they're unable to come to Rome, and to walk through the doors, the holy doors, which is doors that are actually, they're physical doors that are usually sealed shut. They're opened up for the whole year. People can walk through them. So it's like
Do they open and close them at the end of the day, or are they open?
No, they're open. They're open, but they shut
the doors open every 24 hours.
Yes, but then the basilica actually closes, so you can't go through the doors 24 hours a day. And it's an invitation to go from the darkness into the light of a cathedral, right? Or in this case of the Basilica of St. Peter's, right? Entering into the court of God, for example. It's going from having sinned to forgiveness, right? And the Church actually offers special spiritual graces in which people can know that they have been, as long as they actually have confessed their sins to God, and if they're Catholic, through the sacrament of confession, that they are forgiven and they receive special graces from that. But pilgrimages go back not only in the Catholic tradition, but Christian tradition and other religious traditions. Make a pilgrimage. Go do something that's hard. Mm-hmm. Travel a long distance and ask God for forgiveness and receive special graces. So 2025 will be a great year, a year of hope.
It's a Catholic declaration, but what about other Christians? Evangelical Christians, will they be participating? I remember you saying that lots of evangelical Christians love to go to Rome.
Yeah, well, first of all, there will be no Catholic church in heaven. There will be no evangelical church in heaven, or whatever it is, all the thousands of denominations. Mm-hmm. And there's one God, as we believe, and therefore, when we stand in front of Him, it's up to Him to offer us mercy. So St. Peter's Basilica does not belong to the Catholics. Maybe legally it does, but everyone is welcome. And when I lived there for over 9 years, I loved watching non-Catholics show up and say, wow, this is something else. And then get into the history of not only the building of St. Peter's Basilica, but also the entire city of Rome, and recognizing those are Christian roots. Those are not Catholic roots in particular. Those are Christian, those are Jesus roots. Those are St. Paul roots. Those are so many holy men and women who have gone and died because of their faith.
So it really is a city of Peter and Paul in many ways, right? Explain that.
Yeah, Peter and Paul, but they were there because they were establishing the Christian church based on the experience of Jesus.
Sent out from the Holy Land to spread the word.
That's right. And the St. Paul, you can actually go to so many of the places that we know. How did St. Paul died? We know how he was beheaded. And you can go and you can actually be in the place where we believe that he died. And there's a church that's dedicated to his life. St. Paul outside the wall.
And St. Peter was hung upside down near Vatican Square.
Yes, just if you're looking at St. Peter's Basilica, and even if you haven't been there, you can imagine it in your mind. Just beyond the basilica, if you're looking from the square, off to the left, there was a little area which was like a coliseum, area. And that's where many Christians, including St. Peter, were killed. And his bones were taken by the early Christians, were buried, and on top of those bones, going back to the very first century, we see the Christians said, these were the bones of the leader of our church. And there's 4 different churches that were built, one on top of the other over the ages, and it continues that location of honor and respect for the bones of St. Peter goes directly up into the dome of St. Peter's. And if you were to drop a plumb line right from the top of that dome all the way down, you would hit the bones of St. Peter. And millions of people go every year. But this year, they're estimating 32 million people will go through the holy doors and visit the bones of St. Peter.
And Jesus said to Peter, you are my rock. Peter means rock. And on this rock, I will build my church. And literally, that is the Vatican.
That is.
Over time.
I think a lot of Protestants who are listening would say, hey, well, we have a different interpretation of that, which is fair. But listen, because we're human beings, we will always get some things right and some things wrong. And we will have our debates. But one thing that we know for sure when we look at this history, that early Christians believed that this was a very special person who had a very, very important role in the Christian church. And they revered him. And just like we would take care of the remains of a loved one, the Christians took care of his remains, St. Peter's, and the reason why there is St. Peter's Basilica today is because of that respect and honor of St. Peter.
And if you do the Scavi tour in Rome, which I've done a couple of times now, and it's amazing, you hear the stories that Jonathan is conveying and actually get to go down underneath the Vatican and see the architectural remnants of these churches over the centuries that were built on top of each other. And at the very base of it, all of it, the tomb, it's just, you just see sort of like the top of a stone slab in a way.
Yeah, they call it a niche.
Yes.
So it's basically just like a little tiny tomb where that bag of St. Peter's bones was found.
Jonathan, thank you. It's the beginning of a conversation that we're going to have throughout the year, and I think it's one that, people of all faiths, and particularly all Christian faiths, can participate in and think about as we celebrate this year of hope, which I think is something that, I think that you don't realize darkness until it starts to lift. And I think that the whole period around COVID was very difficult. I think it was more difficult than people realize or want to dwell on. And I don't think we should dwell in it, but I think that you only notice it until you start to feel light. And I think that there is that right now. So it's a good year for hope.
Listen, especially teenagers, college students. You have 3 young adult children. COVID was a tough time. Very. Right? Whether you're in college, whether you're in high school, whether you were just starting off in the workforce, my gosh, it's tough. And I truly hope that not only because of the lifting of COVID, and but also just a change in the political winds. I hope at the end of these 4 years, not only will we have a stronger country, but I hope both parties have done serious reflection. The Republican Party needs a strong Democratic Party that's sane. In order to push back, because we don't want any, in my opinion, we don't want any politician or any party to have absolute control in which they're not pushed back in a rational way. And I hope the lifting of the COVID years, but also these new political winds will enhance our America, our republic.
Well said. Jonathan Morris, thank you very much. Always good to see you, Jonathan. Thanks for joining the Untold Story podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time. You've been listening to The Untold Story with Martha McCallum. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Make sure to rate and review. For more podcasts, go to foxnewspodcast.com. Listen ad-free with the Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.